Hello everyone, after a long break, I'm back with Product Chat series. I'm sure this episode is going to be very interesting for a lot of you. Today our guest is Zeeshan Syed, who is not only an amazing content creator on LinkedIn, but also launched his own course after he watched his non-technical coworkers struggle to make sense of how apps were built. And so he decided to build his tech talk for non-developers. Hi Zeeshan, thank you for being here. How are you?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
I'm great too. Also, I would like to point it out that Zishan would be telling more about his course towards the end, so make sure you stay tuned. How about we start with your journey and background? Like, how did you come here?
Yeah, so I've been a developer. Firstly, thank you for that very nice introduction. I've been a developer for over 12 years. I started like back in I think like 2009, 2010 or something like that. Went like the traditional route where I decided to go to school for software engineering. Tried a few things before that, but didn't. I mean, went to a few programs before that, failed out of those miserably, and I finally found that software was something I was good at. I was good at building. But fast forward, I graduated, worked at a couple of startups, did my own stuff for a little while. Then afterwards, I started working back in corporate again. And recently, I was working at a company called Getty Images, which, if you're in the photography or videography space, or even if you're in editorials, you probably have seen some of our photos on the bottom, as part of a watermark on the bottom right corner of a lot of imagery. But yeah, I come from a full stack development background. My journey has always been about learning new things, and I saw my peers kind of struggle to learn about tech, and I was actually kind of inspired by just one meeting that I had when I was working at a company previous to Getty, and that kind of kicked off what I'm doing right now. So full-time content creator, course creator. I'm just looking to teach tech to as many product managers as I can.
Oh, wow, that's inspiring. If you don't mind sharing, what was that one thing you saw during that meeting that like inspired you? Okay, product managers does not know, especially the more like, new tech product manager do not know a lot about like technology. What was that one point?
Yeah, so it was basically a moment that I had in 2019. I was in a morning meeting with a bunch of developers and a couple of product managers. One of them was fairly well versed. She's been with us for a while. The other one was she was pretty new, and she just recently joined the team. So I looked over at her, and she was taking notes down as quickly as humanly possible. She looked like she was kind of like sweating buckets, that kind of thing. She looked like she was on edge. So I went up to her afterwards. I was like, "Hey, Ruby, is everything okay? You look like you're a bit uneasy." And she said something that to me that still has stuck with me to this day. She said, "I have no idea what the hell you people are talking about." And what she meant by was like us developers, and we were talking about version control. We were talking about moving the code from the develop branch, the master branch, deploying it to production, et cetera, et cetera. And that one-on-one that conversation, during that conversation, I just said to her, like, why don't we spend 30 minutes and I'll explain to you what we were talking about, so at least this way you won't be, it'll be easier for you to follow along. So that one-on-one conversation, just like a coffee, what I did was I decided to draw out version control in my notebook and explain to her what we were doing. So this way she knew how the code goes from my computer to the server, and how people actually access it from on a day-to-day basis. So at the end of that conversation, she said, "Wow, this is really helpful. I feel like a lot of other product managers could benefit from this." So that one-on-one conversation transitioned into me mentoring 4 other product managers at that company, and then I started speaking with product managers from all the big tech companies you can think of, like Apple, Google, Amazon, Facebook. So some other ones as well, Uber, Tesla, and all these product managers were telling me pretty much the exact same thing, and that was that you don't need to know how to code in order to be a good product manager, but having technical competency and technical literacy is very important, especially when you're working closely with developers. And I found that was something that a lot of product managers were lacking. and I felt like there was a need for product managers to be taught the stuff that developers do without having to learn how to code. So for myself, I'm a very visual learner. So I decided to make an animated course where I teach the A to Z of app development without ever writing a line of code. And then I started creating content as well, not only to promote my material, but to also just kind of give people a taste of what they can learn.
Right.
So when people, come onto see my content, they check out my course. If they like my course, then they enroll in it, and then it kind of just goes from there. So yeah, but all of it just started from like a simple conversation or an observation rather, where I noticed my coworker struggling, and I just empathized with her, and I just went up to her and asked her, is there anything I can do to help? And here we are, a few years later, and so everything has started from there.
Yeah, I wish like there was honestly, I recently came, I would say I started my product management journey about like 2 years ago. At that time, during the very start, I was struggling, like was actually struggling
Yeah.
because I'm from like healthcare background, and then
Mm,
going into meetings where all the developers are, project managers are, it's so hard to, navigate. Okay, what's an API? Just like simple as that. It was so hard to navigate like a tech conversation there. And for the first few meetings, I was completely blank on like what I need to do. Am I missing anything important? Because a lot of things were just going through my head.
yeah.
So that's really interesting. What do you think are some of the most important technical concepts that product managers should know?
Yeah, so I'm a firm believer in mastering the fundamentals. And I think when you master the fundamentals, it's easy to build on top of that. So in my honest opinion, the fundamentals will be understanding the difference between back end and front end. So what does a back end developer do? What does a front end developer do? As well as like APIs, like what an API actually is, databases, how data is structured. And once you kind of get those four things down, you'll notice that everything else kind of slowly but surely falls into place. And from there, it's just easier to pick up. New concepts, and when technologies kind of change, you can see how you can kind of see like the problem that the newer technology is looking to solve. So as far as to dive a bit deeper into, I mean, as far as APIs are concerned, understanding what a REST API is, because that's what the majority of the web uses. For databases, just learning the differences between like SQL and NoSQL databases and how the data is structured. System design is probably the one that kind of encompasses all four of those things I just mentioned. So understand that one is a big one, because then you get to understand how like the pieces of how like the different components within a large scale system work, and just being able to place them on like a map, and just understanding how data flows. That's like in my opinion, probably what a lot of product managers should be focusing on. But starting off with the basics and then transitioning into system design, that's what I would say is important.
Okay. So you must have like spoken to different like product managers from like different fields. What difference do you see from like maybe a healthcare background to maybe someone working in a fintech? What's a difference in terms of like for the technical knowledge?
So that's actually the interesting thing. Like there's obviously going to be some domain knowledge that's different. I mean, finance is very different than healthcare, but the underlying technology for the most part is pretty similar. Like when you understand back end versus front end, like how APIs work, databases, system, like all of it, all the concepts that go into tech, like they're very like industry agnostic. Like for instance, like a load balancer is in literally every single industry out there. It doesn't matter which company. Every company has a load balancer. Every industry has a load balancer. So that's kind of what I tend to focus on as far as like the differences between like a product manager working in healthcare and finance. I mean, unfortunately, since I'm not a product manager, I can't really dive too much into that, but I can say with a lot of confidence that the technologies that people are going to be using are relatively similar. They may sound a little bit different, but there's obviously going to be some similarities there. But once you understand, as I mentioned, the fundamentals, it's easy to go from one tech company to another and transition that knowledge over. And obviously, what you have to do from there is just understand the domain knowledge. But the tech knowledge, if you get it down, you get it down. And I've worked in a wide variety of tech of companies, from like logistics companies to healthcare companies to to Getty Images, and they all use relatively the same technology. So it's a good thing to understand the fundamentals.
Some really great points. Thank you. What are some of the common misconceptions about tech and PM? Like one of them was about the coding. First, like in the very start, people thought that product managers would also have to code, but that's not the case. What are some other like technical misconceptions that people have?
Yeah, so I'll kind of play off of what I did say and what you were just talking about, and that's like the whether or not product manager needs to know how to code, and I'll kind of transition into what I'm going to mention afterwards. But I don't believe product managers need to know how to code at all. There's obviously going to be some advantages if you're working in tech and you, excuse me, come from a tech back from a developer background.
Yes.
Obviously, it's going to be easier to communicate with developers to some extent, but those PMs sometimes tend to have some biases, and they tend to be like more like engineering PMs, but the engineering should be left to your developers.
Right.
In any case, I don't believe that PMs need to know how to code, but I do think it's important for them to understand technical concepts when they're working closely with developers. And the main reason why is because we all know the PMs wear many different hats, and therefore they're expected to speak multiple languages. So like, and the example that I often give is that let's say you're like a tour guide in Pakistan who only spoke Urdu. You probably wouldn't be very effective at your job because you're only able to communicate with one set of people. Most tourists speak English. So that's why it's important to be able to speak the same language. But particularly when it comes to product management, I've personally witnessed product managers struggle to keep up during meetings because they didn't understand the technical lingo. And from there it kind of stems into struggling to work with developers, even sometimes giving out misinformation because of misunderstandings. One instance that kind of comes to mind is I worked with a PM that told one of the directors of the company that a feature was going to be ready and testable by the end of the week. But when the director went on to production, that feature wasn't even there. Turns out the feature was ready to test on UAT, a completely different environment, not the production environment. So you can kind of see how like sometimes like it can just having like that technical knowledge, knowing what an environment is, knowing where the code goes when it comes to like the full product, the development lifecycle, that can save quite a bit of time and just a little bit of embarrassment as well. Other times I've seen stakeholders, PMs work with stakeholders and trying to, and one of them was trying to test out like an email an email that was supposed to be sent out when an event was triggered, but the testing was done on an environment where emails were actually disabled because that was the way that we set up the environment intentionally. So again, just having that technical knowledge to know where to like what's kind of going on, that's really important. I mean, like I've been in other very annoying circumstances where PMs have tagged every developer in a Slack group because they didn't know who to go to when it came to a specific question they had. And you obviously are on Slack, so you know how annoying it can be when you're tagged and you have 10 plus messages that mention you. Like, so for some reason, people do the @channel tag and they tag everybody. When in reality, you can just message in the group by tagging a specific person, and anyone else who wants to jump in is welcome to jump in. So it's just things like that I think are really important. But going back to the point that I wanted to make initially, and the tour guide example, obviously you need to know how to speak English in order to be a tour guide, but you don't need to be a scholar in English. You don't need to understand Shakespearean English in order to be effective at your job. But so given that, I definitely don't think you need to learn how to code in order to be an effective product manager. You just need to understand some important technical concepts, like I mentioned a few moments ago.
Okay, I love that point. Okay, can you share like some of your examples of how your instructions has helped like product managers from your past experiences?
Yeah. So one of my so I've I have a couple of examples. So one of my okay, one of my students, her name is Yasha. She's actually a product manager at Zynga. And she ended up landing her role after spending some time with me and working with me as well. So I coached her on some common topics that revolved around APIs, databases, server setup. And her role was something that was probably more technical than other roles, at least what she told me. So we spent some time kind of figuring out talking about APIs, how data was structured, how data gets from the client to eventually into the database, and what happens on the server level. and she was able to get that. She was able to get that position. So like that's like that's the one really great example. And she was from what I was told, when she started working, a lot of her colleagues were actually surprised with how much technical knowledge she had. And she was able to build much better relationships with her development team. Another example I can think of was a product manager who works out here in Toronto. She works at she works at a health company. I can't remember what the name of the company is, but in any case, she actually was watching one of my modules on REST API design. So she finished watching that module, and the very next day she was pulled into a meeting with a bunch of her developers, and for whatever reason, the director of product management. So she was asking for a status update on an API that was being built, and she didn't shy away from asking like technical questions and using the jargon that she learned, or technical stuff that she learned from my course in her conversation, so she could understand like how to properly estimate what was going on, just getting an understanding what was happening. And by the end of the conversation, everyone was on the same page. She was on the same page, her developers on the same page, and the director afterwards, who was also on that call, he actually was really impressed with the type of questions she was asking her developers. So, it really just goes to show that you don't need to be a developer in order to effectively communicate with developers. You just need to understand the concepts that the industry revolves around. Because like once you understand those concepts, like the sky really is the limits. The sky's really the limit as far as your career is concerned, and you can go from like these are some very transferable. There's some very transferable knowledge that you can go take from one company to another, and you don't have to worry about not being technical, so to speak. Right. So two really great examples. Both of them, I was very very happy to hear, and I'm sure there's more that I can't think off the top of my head.
Okay. Can you share any like resources out there that product managers can find? I would definitely like to know more about your program as well, but any other resources that you recommend?
Yeah, I mean, like there are a couple of so like the issue that I found with a lot of people who are talking about tech, like on the like a technical level, very technical level, is that a lot of the material that I found was either far too high level and really just not that useful on a day-to-day, but the other stuff was either it was too technical and just really meant for developers. But there are a couple of content creators out there. Arslan Ahmed, who's a product manager. Sorry, he's a not a product manager. He's a software architect out in California. He does a lot of work on system design. He posts a lot of great material. Alex Zhu, I believe his name is. He's also like a guru in system design as well. Both of them have worked at some very big tech companies, and they both have published courses on system design. I do think some of the material might be a bit technical, and that's kind of where I like to come in and break down a lot of the jargon. I don't like to make assumptions when it comes to stuff that I teach. So if I'm going to talk about blobs, for instance, or block servers, I'm going to explain what a blob is. I'm going to explain what a block is, and explain and go into detail on that before I actually put that into a real world scenario. But yeah, I mean, I do publish content regularly, so I would definitely suggest people, if they are interested in learning more about tech, they should definitely check out my content there.
Perfect, thank you. Before the second last question, I would say, can you share any tips for aspiring product managers?
Aspiring tips for product managers. You mean like when it comes to like learning the technology, or
technology point?
Yeah. So I would just say, I would say again, focus on learning concepts rather than learning how to learning how to code. And the reason why is because a lot of when you can learn how to write some basic applications, but that may not necessarily help you in your day-to-day when it comes to interacting with developers, because the stuff that there's only so much that a basic tutorial or a course on Udemy can help you with. You need to, if you really want to understand what developers do, you have to become a developer. But I would just say understand the concepts and be able to visualize and draw out how, let's say, a system is designed for Uber, for Tinder, for whatever application it is that you're building. I'm a big believer in visualizing in visualizing things. So that's kind of how I would suggest people to start. But yeah, try focusing on concepts, ignore learning how to code, and create as many visuals as you can, and maybe have it critiqued by a developer and see if your understanding makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's how that's what the tips I would give there.
Perfect. Okay. That brings me up to my last question. Can you tell more about your course, like the duration, the different modules that you have within the course?
Yeah, so anyone is welcome to go to non-developers.co, non-developers all one word .co. So my course is essentially the A to Z of app development without having to learn how to code. And I teach everything from like a basic technical concepts, like what is high level programming versus low level programming,
Mhm.
all the way up to all the way to like API design, the different points of an API, database design, how database data is structured, caching. At the end of the course, so there is like a nice little project that we do where we build out a social media application with like 15 different features, and we design the API and the database for all of that, so we can see how everything would work from start to finish. Very soon, I'm actually going to be releasing another course on system design exclusively for product managers. So I'm going to be talking about I'm going to be talking about load balancers. I'm going to be talking about blobbing. I'm going to talk about there's like different case studies for like some big tech companies like Slack, Uber, Tinder, Facebook, Google Drive, all Netflix. So really interesting stuff that I'm excited to release very soon. But yeah, if people want to check out my work, they're welcome to go to nondevelopers.co or just check on my LinkedIn profile, and you're welcome to see what it is that how it is that I like to teach and what it is I'm teaching exactly.
Perfect. That's really exciting and interesting. I will definitely put the link and your LinkedIn profile in the comments as well. But thank you so much for sharing all the insights. This was very helpful, especially I'm like very early in my career. So definitely knowing all those things and having a
Yeah.
resource that exists, that's very helpful. So thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem, Faith. I appreciate you having me here, and and best of luck to you on your journey.
Thank you so much.